Every week, I see another study or statement talking about the dangers of ultra processed foods. While families may need to hunt in grocery stores to find the healthy alternatives, they are out there. So let's talk about it. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. David Berger, a board certified pediatrician in Tampa, Florida. The focus of my practice is on healthy living. How can we make healthy kids? So we're talking today about ultra processed foods, and it's to be important to recognize that we're not just talking about processed foods made in a food processor like a puree or a smoothie in a blender. By definition, that is a processed food. That's not what we're talking about. Ultra processed foods are made from foods, but they're not whole foods. There may be ingredients from the foods, but there's lots of other things that are in there that make them also very unhealthy, particularly for children. They're often packed with loads and loads of sugar, unhealthy fats, artificial additives. And regular consumption has been shown can lead to excessive weight gain with an increased risk of childhood obesity and certainly into adulthood. And they do contribute to the onset of childhood illnesses, like early onset obesity, type 2 diabetes, and heart disease, which is becoming a problem for younger people now. And of course, this is a setup for young adulthood and as we move on in life. Now, typically, they are low in the essential nutrients that we need: vitamins, minerals, fiber. And these are crucial for growth and development and overall well-being for our immune systems and everything else. It also can lead to unhealthy eating habits. A lot of these foods are highly addictive, and a lot of the poor choices and what foods are consumed can impact cognitive function as well, and therefore academic performance later on. Best thing that one can do is to start off early in infancy, early childhood. Don't get started on the unhealthy foods. Easiest way to not go down that path. Now, there are alternatives, and we're going to get into a lot of them. But the most important thing that you can do is read labels. Look at the sodium content. Are there preservatives, artificial colors, artificial flavors? Are there saturated versus polyunsaturated fats, chemical sounding ingredients, just the generic flavoring? All of those should be really good hints that these are ultra processed food. And one of the best things that we can do is to cook and bake with our children. That way you know what's going into your kids. But having them involved in the process, it makes them feel proud of what they're doing. They may be more inspired to eat the foods because they had something to say. Shop with them. Let them be part of the entire experience as soon as they're able to have that function of understanding of what they're doing. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about is baby formula. In 2023, the World Health Organization stated, by definition, milk formulas themselves are ultra-processed foods. Now, that's not to say that baby formula might not be essential for somebody who can't get breast milk. Of course, you can't really give them anything else. But we should acknowledge it is an ultra-processed food. It's not a whole food. And we can't be giving babies like whole milk or whole, or just like, other types of things, because like plant-based milks, because they don't have the nutrients. Breast milk has the obvious answer, but formulas, at least they have the other stuff in there. Now, if a child is having nursing, if a baby is having nursing, of course, that needs to be something addressed immediately. I've put down into the show notes in the description a PDF from Dr. Jack Newman, who is North America's breastfeeding guru, and he shows in this little link there that there are proper positionings that can prevent any kind of nipple damage and latch problems in the first place, or how to fix those types of problems if they're appearing, because of course those first few days of life can have a very big impact on what happens in the long term in terms of whether a baby is going to be a successful breastfeeder or not. Now, of course, if you can't nurse, pump. It's still the same nutrition. And of course, partial breast milk is still better than no breast milk at all. And even if it's mixed with formula or it's done separately, it's still providing a lot of the nutrients. And the one thing that formula can't provide, the antibodies that are expressed and put into breast milk, are the antibodies that are in the milk, are from what the mother is being exposed to. So it's kind of like an individual antibiotic for that baby, which is pretty cool. Now, if you have to use a formula, there are still better alternatives. There are formulas that are made from organic milk. That could be very important. And of course, you can choose ones that have 5-methylfolate in it, which is the activated form of folate. Since through MTHFR, some babies cannot take folate and turn it into methylfolate. But if it's there already, then you don't have to worry about the conversion. Now, also, you can look to see what type of oils are being used in that baby formula. Look for those that have oils that are higher in omega-9 fatty acids as opposed to omega-6 fatty acids. Now, in terms of foods themselves, first, frozen and pre-made meals. Certainly, they're convenient, no doubt about that, but they're often lower in nutrition and higher in sodium. They have unhealthy fats in them, a lot of them, and usually they're loaded with preservatives. Now, what are the alternatives? First and foremost, home-cooked meals, homemade meals. They're going to be the healthiest. You know exactly what's going into your child. And there are simple, quick recipes, several ingredients, short preparation times, short cooking times that you can do. The recipes are readily available online and in cookbooks. So that's something that people can do. And then again, you know what you're going into your kid. But if you do need to use these kind of more prepackaged foods, pay attention to the serving size also besides the ingredients, because sometimes they have small serving sizes to make it sound like there's not that much sodium or sugar in it. But if you realize that your kid is eating a package, but there's 4 servings in a package, you're going to have to double the amount to know what your kid is actually getting at that meal. Now, packaged snacks as well. So before we're talking about the actual whole meals, but now snacks. And in particular, things like chips, crackers, pretzels. Okay, they can be loaded with salt. Often have a lot of preservatives because you got to keep them crunchy. And often there can be either higher in fat or high in carbs. And if there's any flavoring in it whatsoever, by definition, that's an ultra-processed food. Any added flavoring is going to be an ultra-processed food. Now, especially in the chip variety, because there's going to be things that are not like fruit sweetened, because it wouldn't really be that much for fruit sweetened chips. But what are the alternatives? Now, not all packaged foods are ultra-processed, so you have to know what you're doing. Read the labels, again, for the ingredients. But for some things, of course, if a kid wants a crunchy snack, we do have other non-chip alternatives. Things like carrots, celery, colored peppers, tortilla chips. Now, tortilla chips, while they can still have fat and while they can still have salt, you can see how much you can compare. But this is just cornmeal that's shaped, and then fried in oil and with salt. And of course, there are different types of oils that you can choose from. That in of itself is not an ultra processed food because it's just being made from the whole food. Now, popcorn, same thing. Packaged popcorn, exceptionally flavored, that's not going to do it. But there are popcorns that are out there that are just the popcorn, the salt, the oil, and of course, making your own even better. You can, that's the healthiest way of going, and you can get even organic popcorn seeds. You can add a little salt if you want to add some butter to it, whole butter, that's healthier than buttered flavor that you'd see that's in a lot of microwaved or store-bought or movie, for that matter, movie popcorn as well. Pretzels. Now, pretzels you can find that are made from whole grains, okay? And some of them may be split in a way that there's more airy to them, so there's just less total carbs altogether. And again, if it's just some oil, if it's baked, if it's just some salt and the whole grains in it, then again, that's something that is not necessarily ultra-processed food. And the same thing is so with potato chips. Again, not necessarily the healthiest food, pardon me, but if you're talking about a sliced potato and oil and salt as the only ingredients, then that's not an ultra processed food. So again, watch for the types of oils that are being used there, but there are alternatives out there that are still snack foods. Now, packaged baked goods, biggest problem with them, loaded with sugar, loaded with hydrogenated oils, refined processed flours, additives, flavors, preservatives. Probably some of the packaged baked goods that are out there are probably amongst the worst offenders that are out there. What are the alternatives? Baking at home, right? Using local ingredients, using ingredients that are healthy, whole grains, natural sugar as opposed to whole, fructose corn syrups types of things. But also local bakeries. A lot of local bakeries may pride themselves on the higher quality ingredients, fresher ingredients. They can tell you what they're cooking with, and maybe they can even modify if you have a problem with it. But this is kind of like a nice badge for them, is to be having healthier baked goods out there. Some even market it as such. Now, also things like making nut breads. They can be healthy too. So again, homemade pizza crust even. versus store-bought pizza crust versus, pizza night, when we're adding just some natural tomato sauce and some healthier cheese, that could be a really helpful thing as well. And while we're talking about cheese, let's talk about processed cheeses, American cheese, the packaged sliced cheeses. They don't, if you look at the package, they're not even considered cheese. They're considered like processed cheese-like products. It says it right there. Now, of course, there are whole cheeses out there that one can get that are sliced, that are much healthier. Again, they're still going to have saturated fat in it, but that's a much better option than a sliced cheese processed product. Cereals. Now, almost all cereals that are marketed for children are going to be ultra-processed. It's not a coincidence that in supermarkets, the bottom shelves, the bottom couple shelves with all the cartoons on it and the bright colored boxes, because that's at the eye of the child. I see this. And the healthiers are almost always on the top shelves or maybe in their own section. But of course, that's good marketing, not healthy for our kids, but that's good marketing. But again, so much sugar in these things that you really have to look at these. But what are the alternatives? There are cereals that are made from whole grains, and look to see if whole grain is the first ingredient. That's a pretty good tell. If there's like other kinds of grains and then down the line it says it's with whole grain, there's not a lot in there. Fiber. Does it have 3 or more grams of fiber per serving? That's a pretty good tell as to whether it's a healthy food, and of course that it's a whole grain as well. But there are other alternatives besides boxed cereals. Things like oatmeal, especially like fresh, like a steel cut oatmeal that are not loaded with the artificial flavors that may be in a package of oatmeal. Granola, and again, not necessarily the box sweetened kind, but there are certainly at health food stores and elsewhere in packages that don't have a ton of sugar. Maybe they're sweetened with some honey instead. But again, read the packages, and of course, those are going to be whole grains almost by definition, and maybe has some raisins or something else that's in there. So you can make a good meal out of that. And then shredded wheat, shredded whole wheat, that again is going to be by definition a whole grain, but also puffed whole grains. Anything that's more airy is just going to have not as much carbohydrate to it because there's more air into it, but it can be just as filling, so maybe not have them eat as much of it. But of course, other breakfast items, eggs and egg whites. Now, I know a lot of kids may not like egg whites, but what you can do is put 1 whole egg in, maybe 2 egg whites in there, and then you're avoiding that much yolk in terms of the cholesterol and the saturated fat, but it still looks and tastes like regular eggs, and it cooks like regular eggs. Also, things like power muffins, zucchini muffins. There are different types of whole grain types of muffins that we could be making. Now, processed meats, hot dogs, bacon, jerky, other lunch meats. Usually tons of preservatives. Again, you have to check the label. But these types of processed meats, they're now being linked to colon cancer and other types of cancer. In fact, that seems to be the reason why colon cancer is now being diagnosed about a decade earlier in terms of the average age compared to how it was a couple of decades ago. It's really being keyed in on, and that's a very mainstream concept now. But also, there have lots of preservatives, very high in fat. Saturated in particular. So what are the alternatives? Of course, first most, freshly cooked meats. That's going to get you what you need. Now, in terms of other types of things like turkey breast at a deli or roast beef, again, you have to see what kind of preservatives in there. But if they're just taking the turkey, or if they're just taking the beef and slicing it and in some type of manner, that could be a lot healthier than other types of like a chicken roll or pastrami's or salamis or some of those things that are super duper processed. So you can still do better even at the sliced deli counter. But again, you should know what you're purchasing. Now, another thing, sugary drinks. And that's probably, again, one of the most obvious things. If you've ever looked at a can of regular soda, if you really want to look at a frozen icy type of drink, go online and you'll see how much sugar in some of those types of things. Maybe those are sold at stores that have numbers on them, on the stores. It's incredibly amount of sugar, almost always going to be having added flavorings, added colorings again. But not just that. A lot of the sports drinks, look at there, like regular Gatorade, for instance, tons of sugar and added food colorings, although they do now have natural options in that brand and others. Juicy drinks, not 100% juice, but juicy drinks. Juice concentrates. Most juice concentrates also have a lot of preservatives and additives too. Colorings, flavorings, etc. So what's the alternative? Water, water, and water. Now, really from the beginning, after besides breast milk, it's really the only thing that we should be putting into our bodies from a liquid perspective, maybe adults. So, a cup of coffee or two, if it's not loaded with sugar, that can be a healthy thing as well. But especially for our kids, it's water. There's really no reason to do anything else. Now, maybe you need a little juice if you're trying to get some supplements into a kid. That's a different story. I look at that as a vehicle as opposed to a nutritional substance. But besides that, what could you do? You can water down juice. Maybe put like a splash of juice or 1 or 2 ounces of juice in a cup of water, and then it's very diluted. And if you have a kid who's already hooked on juice, maybe something that would work would be start off with putting 1 ounce less of juice and 1 ounce of water in there for a few days, and then substitute another ounce and another ounce with water so that eventually you have very little juice, and maybe you can just switch over to water at that point once they realize that that's what it's tasting like. And of course, sparkling waters, you can have juice infused sparkling waters as well. You can have juice infused waters. That's something that one can be doing with a little lemon or a little orange in it. That's perfectly fine too. All right. So the main take home here, we can do better. Some of us already are. But as a nation, we have to do better. This has to start with education. We should be teaching our kids in schools what healthier foods are. This really can, especially in health classes and in nutrition classes in high school, because those are the next generation of parents who are going to be making those decisions. But it's going to be a challenge unless they're more available and more affordable. I realize that's a problem, especially in some underserved populations, that it may just not be on the shelves or it's super expensive. And that's something that really needs to change. But it's not impossible. That is what they do in Europe. It's a lot easier and a lot more affordable there. So it can be done. And hopefully, with all of this information that we now have, as a nation, we can make a change so that the future generations of children are not exposed to what we've been exposed to. Now, individually, though, do the best that you can. That's all we can do. Make the choices whenever you can. And, it's not just with this, and, of course, with lots of other things that we talk about, be it the plastics and the metals. I mean, all the health, make sure we have healthy air. All of these things are choices that we can make. And we need to prioritize what we're doing if our goal is to have healthy children. Have a nice day.